Today we explore the pixelated Metroidvania that is being and becoming. Let's talk about that. You're making this game in, is it Game Maker because it's a platformer?
Okay. Yeah, Game Maker Studio 2.
Okay, so with that in mind, what's proven to be one of the bigger hurdles as you kind of dive into this? Obviously, it's got a lot of artistic style to it. You know, there's the elements of balancing weapons and things of that nature, level design, everything in between. But what's kind of stuck out as one of the bigger roadblocks for you in terms of development?
So originally, it was actually the shader effects were a big thing for me to learn. We actually wound up, one of our artists we took on is a shader pro.
Oh, okay.
So he handles a lot of that stuff now to make it a lot easier. But he's a real math whiz kid, and I'm not. So it was a big help for that. But yeah, some of that stuff is really complicated what you can do.
Talking about the story itself in the game, kind of where did that idea come from, and just what is the story within this game all about? How does it progress as you go through the game?
Most of the focus on the game and the story-wise is about a dream spilling into the world. I guess the inspiration for it came from my own life. I have hypnagogia, like that sleep paralysis, and so that idea of, a dream literally spilling into the world inspired me for this idea. But in the actual story, what happens is there's a kind of a seaside kingdom, and the king falls into sleep, and the dream he has spills into the world and actually alters the entire area. The structures and everything like that, as well as the people themselves, change and alter.
Where are you exactly in development? Are you kind of in the early stages still? Are you at the midpoint? Are you kind of wrapping things up? Is that story still kind of evolving as you move forward, or is it kind of set where it's at and you're just kind of polishing it?
As far as development goes, we're in the thick of it right now, so it's not crazy far out, but the way I approached it with the story structure was created a really solid skeleton. So the bosses play a very big part in our game. They're very interactive directly and indirectly with the player.
Okay.
So they have very distinct personalities. So I set up the personalities, I set up the overall story structure, how it begins, how it ends, and basic progression through. And the thing I say with the guys on the team is usually the rule of cool. So we take, we have these basic outline, and then we go through and come up with neat ideas for visuals or gameplay elements, and then we try to focus on those elements, refining them when we go through.
When I was doing research for the game, I noticed a lot of the story elements, from what I could tell, are impacted by player choices. So can you kind of talk about that one for me?
With the player choice, it's both on a obvious and direct and a more subtle indirect kind of thing. It's not like a Mass Effect where you're choosing to be good or bad, that kind of thing, or a dialogue option. Instead, it's more just how you play the game, which areas you approach, in which order, that kind of thing. For example, there's a boss that changes pretty radically based on when you approach them. The later you wait to fight this boss, the more their influence spreads throughout the world, and it'll actually alter some of the environments and what enemies appear and their difficulty in the actual fight.
So it's more like environment-based than actual, like, changing the story itself to the game?
Yeah,
Okay.
so how you actually approach playing the game, like there'll be some obvious signposted things like, hey, if I make a decision here, it's going to do something. None of them are dialogue based right now. They're all just mechanically based.
Okay.
But some will be very obvious, and some will be not necessarily realized unless you go back and play again or talk to somebody else who play the game and they get a different reaction to how they went through an area.
Does that play into different endings in any way, or is it kind of one set ending, you're not planning on kind of branching into multiple?
There are different types of bits to the ending.
Okay.
As of right now, it's not like Fallout where you have 15 like very, very different setups. There is somewhat of a set path, but you get different perspectives on things based on how you interacted with the bosses.
How long do you want this story to be in terms of length? Obviously, that's kind of a loaded question. It's hard to really tell how long a story is going to be, but on an estimate.
So I would say the game length as of right now, and this is just a rough estimate currently, I'd say probably between 8 to 12 hours. It's a little tricky to guesstimate because some of the bosses are pretty tricky. It's not like insane difficult. You're not playing Sekiro or something.
Yeah.
But it is challenging, so it might take people more or less time based on how they do with that.
Another element to this is that it is a Metroidvania, so there's elements where you can, go back and explore things or go back with new abilities, obviously, and kind of unlock new areas, things of that nature. That kind of transitions into the level design itself. So can you talk to me about the game world? Talk to me about how those levels are structured, how you kind of promote that explorability. Just kind of explore that area for me.
One of the things I think that stands out with our game is that the actual world itself, like I mentioned earlier, changes with your decisions. It'll also change based on some of the stuff you do within the world and the progression through the game. So you'll actually revisit areas and they'll be different when you come back through. So basically the way the world evolves is based on your choice and your progression. And for example, one of the areas you go through, you're hunted by the boss essentially directly, where he'll directly interact with you from the background. Later, you'll go back through the area, and based on how you actually ran through, so for example, that's a big wolf-like creature, and he'll pounce, say, for example, and break something. That break actually stays permanently, and it's now altered how the world connects together. So that the actual layout of that room setup, like that whole area will change based on what's been broken or opened up. Some things might be opened up by him smashing through something. The way the world actually connects together, as of right now, there are no teleport fast travel. That's all things you gotta walk through, classic Metroid. The world is set up more for shortcuts, so you can open up these little paths throughout. But yeah, you have a main hub that you start in, a quicker route hub in the center of the map. So between the area connections and that central pathway, it's a lot easier to get to areas back and forth. And when you come back, like I said, there will be alterations.
Talk to me about the central hub. We haven't obviously talked about the weapons, the gear, anything like that, but is that somewhere you can kind of change out gear, change out abilities, things of that nature? Kind of how does that play into the game?
Right now, you can actually change out your abilities, and there is some collectible things that alter what you get. But the hub itself just acts as more of a quick and easy way to get through different areas. You might have different opportunities when characters appear to speak with or interact with and things like that. But primarily, it's more just a base hub.
There are multiple hubs as you go through the game?
First one you start with, you start in it, and you get the choice of going to one of 3 areas, and you can choose whichever one you want to start with. There's no particular order that you have to go in. Then the second area you kind of unlock throughout the game. You're unlocking new sections of it to make it easier to go through.
Okay, and there's a hub for each section in that sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there an element of side quests in this game? Is there an element of like NPC interaction? Kind of how does that work?
Yeah, so that you'll get little bits of lore and info about the world from these characters. They can reward you with different things based on, little side quests and stuff that you do with them. And some of those interactions can, change how things play out long term.
It's less of side quests and more of like a story element then?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I would probably categorize it as a side quest because you do get rewards. The thing I try to do with the story is as much participation as you like, essentially. So if you don't care, you can be very rude and walk away from people. All the dialogue is delivered in the world, so if you want to sit around and listen, you can do it. If not, you can walk away. We even added a little bit of a positional audio, so it gets quieter as you walk away.
Oh, okay, nice.
But yeah, they'll give you anything that you get from a character, they'll give to you right off the bat. So you get the thing that you want, and if you want to listen to the story, you're welcome to. If not, see you later.
Gotcha. In that way, I would assume that side quests, they don't have any kind of direct impact on the story itself, kind of changing it, altering it, things of that nature.
Some of the character interactions and what you can access later on and things like that, there is a little bit of stuff to it, to actually changing some things. So it's to varying degrees depending on the character.
You'd mentioned their abilities. Talk to me about just kind of the core gameplay first, and then kind of dive into the weapons, the abilities, all of that.
I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. For a controller, for example, all the face buttons are your weapons mostly. You also have the bumpers as well. As you go through, as you beat each boss in the early game, you'll be given another weapon. The way that the combat system works, there are 4 weapons at the start of the game that you can get from beating 4 different bosses. There are only those 4 weapons. You actually unlock different stuff throughout the game that build on those weapons. And each of those weapons has a 3-hit combo. Where you use it in the combo, it will be that thing. And once you learn the weapons, and what each of their attacks is, you can easily switch to whichever those things are. And each one kind of has different benefits and weaknesses. Some are more focused on speed, some on horizontal, some vertical, things like that. So once you learn, what each weapon does, you can very quickly adjust mid-combo. They all have an aerial combat system as well. There's 3-hit combos on the ground and in the air, they're different. The later unlocks are actually the boss of the later game bosses. So once you beat a boss, you have the ability to get a passive by playing like them. So for example, one of the bosses is very aggressive, very evasive and aggressive. And once you get their spirit, you'll be able to build up the passive system by doing a perfect dodge. So dodging like the second before something lands. And if you do that a few times, you'll be able to go into full boss passive mode. As of right now, this thing that we're doing for it is like a double dodge. So usually there's a little bit of a cooldown between dodges. It's like half a second or something like that. Like I mentioned, when you play like them, you build up passive mode until the point where you are in that passive mode for that boss. So as long as you're in that mode, you can keep using, like I mentioned before, the double dodge. You can use that indefinitely. The only way to get rid of it is you can actually summon the boss for a big attack. That cashes out your whole passive thing. So you get like a stand, basically, to come out and do an attack. Each one has different stuff. Some are more combat, some are more evasive. They have different little benefits to them. but then you have to re-up your passive system again to regain that boss passive mode.
You'd mentioned, you have those weapons and then you have attachments as you go on. Are there abilities within the game?
Each of those weapons actually has an ability tied to them. I don't know if it'll stay this way, but right now if you hold the left bumper controller, it toggles ability mode. So if you press any of the buttons associated with the weapon, it'll do the ability.
Okay.
So one of the ones we've showed off so far is the big AoE.
It showcases like parts of the map for you, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll highlight things that are interactable.
Mm-hmm.
So without that weapon, they're not interactable. But when you have it, it starts opening up things, and it'll break or fix things. So each of those things that you break, I can also repair it with that. Things that didn't seem accessible before can become accessible in strange ways.
Can it be upgraded in any way? Does it have a skills tree? Is there a leveling system? Things of that nature in the game?
As it currently stands, there isn't a skill tree or anything like that, but we do have collectibles that you can get throughout the game that you can use to upgrade each of these weapons, sometimes the abilities, depending on their combat applications and how they work. But you can get, I guess, kind of like experience points kind of things from defeating enemies, and then you can funnel those into these collectibles to upgrade. And we're trying to make it so that the upgrades are noticeable. It's not like, oh, you get 5% more damage, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to do something where it actually radically alters how you approach that weapon.
I know you don't have a Steam page yet. I know you don't have a Kickstarter going. Are those things you have planned in the future, or like a demo? Kind of what does 2022 look like for this game?
We're working on the Steam page as we speak.
Okay.
So that'll be up shortly, not super far away. As far as demo goes, that's something that we're also looking to do. We'd like to get on some of the events. The Steam events, they have different demos and stuff like that you can put up. Development-wise, we're in the thick of it. We have one area that's totally done. Basically, we're stepping through. We have the skeleton versions of each area, and we're kind of stepping through and we're fleshing them out.
Are you planning on trying to launch it on platforms, or is it strictly PC? Kind of what are you looking at as a launch base?
As of right now, it's just PC.
Okay.
I'd like to see if I can get it to other stuff, but there's no official confirmation on that just yet.
So with that in mind, is there anything kind of you wanted to touch on specifically within the game, from a gameplay standpoint, from a story element, the world, anything of that nature?
I guess I would like to talk about the bosses just a little bit. I would say that, with each of the bosses in the game, they have a distinct personality. Everything's voice acted. All the bosses have voice acting, all the NPCs. And as you go through, the bosses will actually speak to you within your interactions with them. Each of them has a different interaction level. I mentioned the one boss that hunts you directly from the background. They'll attack and break environmental pieces. One of the things we showcased on Twitter was the one that alters reality, essentially, where it's, everything looks nice and it rips open like a corruption change, and it alters the level design and the way the background looks, things like that. We actually have one we're going to show off very soon, where you're in a library that's kind of like a stadium, and as you're going through, they can actually alter the room layouts. The main boss is in the middle of it, and you're on the outside ring.
Okay.
And he can actually move your room around and kind of spin around how the rooms connect together. So there's a little bit of puzzle solving with that to figure out how to fit things together properly to progress. So each of these bosses has different levels of interaction. They're all pretty heavy. It's mostly things that can pretty dramatically alter the environment or things of that nature, or it change how you would normally go through it.
With the music in the game, does that have any direct impact or any direct correlation to, say, like a boss fight where there's like phases of music that change as the boss fights progress, or like the story or things of that nature? How does that work?
Yeah, so actually the boss we've been showing off currently on Twitter, the supplicant, she has 3 phases in her fight, and the music changes completely for each phase. So we have one boss who is basically a conductor. So all of his attacks have music cues. Even if you closed your eyes, you could tell which attacks were coming based off of how the music changed, and they'll basically light up different parts of the orchestra based on which attack's coming. So one's like, the brass section, that comes up, you're like, oh, okay, this attack's gonna come. Okay. That kind of thing. So we tried to do lots of little stuff. We've been kind of going crazy with different ideas. So we're working the guys pretty hard with all my crazy ideas going. But yeah, our composer Holland's a very talented guy. And he's been doing lots of different music tracks for us that sync up, not just thematically, but actually mechanically with the game.
And there you have it. That is being and becoming a dream world of pixelated proportions. I cannot wait to explore this game when it releases. And until then, make sure you check out all the social media pages linked below, and check out the videos that are about to pop up on either side of you. And before you go, why not subscribe? I'm Nick, this is The Side Quest, and as always, stay gaming.